up? We are back at it. Last week of the fantasy football regular season for most people. I'm Joe Frick. With me, as always, the one, the only, the legendary Drew Hannes. Drew, how you doing, man? It's been a couple weeks. How's the bye week season for you?
It was weird. It was weird not doing this every week. I missed you like crazy while you were out doing my dream vacation, which is freaking awesome. And I can't wait to see more photos. I've already seen the ones that you and Sarah put up, but Hobbit Land, baby, it's awesome.
Yeah, I'll send you the nudes later. Can't be putting those up on my mains, you know. Gotta keep the people guessing. Gotta keep that premium content only for the elite eyes. But yeah, it was definitely cool. Waking up at 5 a.m. to watch football isn't always an easy task. That Browns Steelers game was especially difficult because, as you know, my wife is a Browns fan. So
It's so weird to
um,
hear you say Brown Steelers as the last one too, because that was several weeks ago. It's like Jesus Christ, it's really been that long.
Well, yeah, because it was like, so we flew out and then it was like, okay, so then Brown Steelers is that Monday in Australia.
Yep.
And then so it was like, all right, like Sarah's like, well, I don't think I'm gonna watch the game. I don't care. Backup QB, like da 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 da. And so then like the first 3 quarters of the game, I'm like, all right, kind of what I'm expecting. Like Steelers football, we'll figure it out in the fourth. She comes waltzing back in, like 8 a.m. all rested, and like I'm already like hating my life. And then obviously it doesn't pan out well, but yeah, we'll see. We'll see what shakes out with the Lurs. But fantasy football, big things happening. Last week of the regular season, like I said, and it's the third week of the Scott Fishbowl playoffs. Are you still alive?
I'm alive and I'm kicking real hard, like my son up there in my wife's belly, kicking like crazy. Top was almost in the top 150 going into this week, but a big week from Jamar Chase. Jake Browning, people that started him in the flex where he popped off, kind of pushed me out of the 150. I think it was in like 180, right? Something like
Yeah, yeah. It's
that.
funny. I my goal was to make it to last week for Fishbowl,
Yep.
right? So I was like, okay, I'm gonna take Josh Allen. I don't know if I'm gonna be in a position where I can win, but my idea was let me get to the dance with Josh Allen, and hopefully the average I can ride out and
Right.
get there. And Kenny Pickett, based on what I've seen in the preseason, is gonna take this huge leap forward, and it's not even gonna matter because I'm gonna have 2 studs.
Yep.
So then that leaves me with Kenny in my QB1 slot. And so I've been trying to find a third QB all season. I started with Kyle Trask. I had all these different things happening. And my most recent attempt at another quarterback has been Dorian Thompson Robinson, who was out with a concussion. So in comes Joseph Flacco, elite quarterback. And I'm like, all right, like I got a bunch of people on bye. I'm going to roll with him in the flex. Kenny goes out second quarter. I've got 5 points from him. Flacco puts up a 25 spot for me. I squeak through. I was like 850 last week, I think, in terms of score.
Mm-hmm.
So exciting stuff. So both the around the 412 guys making it to the top 1,000 Scott Fishbowl. Super pumped. But we'll see if we can make it into the top 500. It's gonna be tough, man. They said the projected total is gonna be like 440. I think they said.
Yeah, and the first 2 rounds I destroyed that number. So I'm just like, just continue on just a little bit. I've been riding Sam Laporta and Kyron Williams all season. Like I picked them in rounds 21 and 23, and like that's clearly the recipe. You have to hit on a couple late guys. Everything comes
Yeah,
to fruition.
no, for sure. I think from what I've learned from this year, and I feel this way, and I've drafted pretty consistent like this in the super flex mode. I think it's safe to get 2 QBs early that you know are going to work out well. I think in hindsight, if I could have done things a little bit different, I had the opportunity to take Dak at round 2, and I didn't. That was something I strongly considered going into that draft, and was like, okay, like if he's there, he's one of those guys. The other 2 guys that were on that for me in the round 2, it was all right. Dak was my third option. Tyreek Hill was 1. Nick Chubb was 2. Chubb fell to me. I took him second round. And then I was like, all right, well, then I'm going to wait as long as I can and take one of those lower round QBs and hope they pop off. I went with Kenny. I could have very easily had Jordan Love, which would have been great.
Yep.
CJ Stroud, which would have been great. But by not stacking those picks early at QB, it allowed me to beef up a lot of different other positions. So yeah, a lot to learn. But yeah, it's cool. I mean, you're in the top 25% already. So kudos to you, kudos to the show, and kudos to everybody that's involved with that. It's been a lot of fun. Really enjoyed getting to know all the people, especially from like the Dallas live chat. It's been cool. And then like beating somebody like Matt Berry who gets like paid to do this, like I'm not gonna lie, it feels pretty damn good.
And Eric Moody.
Yeah. So that's definitely something that throw up on the LinkedIn and get some endorsements for knowing ball. But we've got a show to do. We can't talk about all of our awesome things that we do all the time. So let's get this party going, man. So if we're thinking about kind of the typical flow of the show, Dr. Drew, put the lab back in, get the jacket on. What do we got? What's going on the injury front?
Actually, so much. And I'm only doing 1 week. I was gonna go back and consider doing that we missed, and I was like, there's way too many this week to even do that. So I'm just gonna run through it real quick, and a lot of it's unknown, to be honest, like what's gonna happen. But Hollywood Brown, he left the game against the Steelers with a heel injury. He had a goose egg against us.
The Joey Porter effect.
Yeah, I don't know if he came into it a little nicked up, but
he hasn't looked right the last couple of weeks, especially with when Kyler came back. I think a lot of people are surprised that he hasn't been the one to turn up, but I mean, we'll talk about it in a little bit.
Are we though?
I'm surprised. I thought that they were gonna, like, he was like one of those people that like a stash and hold for the connection, especially because they both went to Oklahoma.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about the Trey McBride hype though, and the dude just so sick.
Oh yeah, he's sick.
And then Amari Cooper, he's in the concussion protocol. We know how that is. We'll see how it goes throughout the week, but there's probably a good chance that he misses this week. We got Christian Watson with a hamstring injury.
Still hate you.
Hey, I can't predict that stuff. Yeah, Christian Watson with the hammy. We were supposed to get an update on him yesterday on his status, but I went on to the NFL.com injury list, and there was nothing different there. So we'll continue to look out for that. But you know how he is with hammies. He's been fighting those his whole career.
Oh, yeah.
Just constantly week to week. So my cat has been terrible the last like 20 minutes. Once we started, she's just jumping on everything. Tank Dell, this is the biggest impact for fantasy owners and just people that love the NFL. Like the dude was killing it in his rookie year. He was slept on in the draft coming out of Houston. CJ Stroud was all about him. They played together, obviously, showing how much CJ Stroud was all about him. But he broke his fibula. He's obviously going to be out for the rest of the season. I imagine that he should be, healthy come next year. So dynasty-wise, I wouldn't worry too much because when it's a broken bone, you get that surgery, heal up. There's always the risk for re-injury, but broken bone like a fibula, you would think that he should be good to go come next year.
Yeah.
Christian Kirk, he has a core muscle injury. He's likely to miss time. This one was really weird. I don't know if you were watching that game.
Yeah.
Yeah, he just immediately just grabbed his nuts, and just people were on.
Well, they were saying it was like testicular torsion and like all of this stuff. Like, yeah.
That's what my first thought was, but core muscle injury, probably a groin. But it looked like it was pretty significant. So I wouldn't be shocked if he was an IR candidate, and you might be out the rest of the season for fantasy.
Yeah. I mean, are you going to play him with CJ Beathard? Like, maybe not. All right, we're on a cat chase, it looks like.
I'm sorry. She pees on stuff if I let her up there, so I'm not going to let her up there. So,
math checks out. I wouldn't either.
CJ Beathard actually looked pretty decent though when he came in for.
Yeah, I mean he is like one of those like backups. He kind of reminds me of like Nick Mullins when he was in San Francisco. I mean Beathard also in San Francisco, but like they would sling it. Like it wasn't like a check down Charlie kind of situation. It was like, all right, like you can let me in the game, I'm a ball. Which scares me for the Steelers this week because Mitch is like, I'm going to be aggressive. And I'm like, no, please.
No, you're not.
Don't.
He's going to throw 2 picks. Guarantee it. But yeah, dude's been around the block. Obviously, you kind of alluded to the next one with Trevor Lawrence with a high ankle sprain. That one looked brutal.
Yeah.
I think that he's probably going to miss some time, especially because they have Super Bowl aspirations. I don't think there's too much of concern based on their schedule, I think that they could still win a few games with CJ Beathard. So if they aren't winning those games, to be honest, I could see them rushing him back because they obviously want to win that division. But the smart thing to do is I'd say at least 2 weeks, maybe 3 that we would
Yeah.
win.
I think the biggest thing for Jacksonville, it's like they're obviously in the driver's seat in that division, which is good. The division is fairly weak outside of Houston, which is good. But does the idea of potentially losing that home game to Houston, like how much does that impact when they bring him back? Because if Houston slides, like they're what, 8-4 now? So it's like they're in a pretty good spot.
7-5 too. I think they're aligned with the Steelers because the Steelers are the 5 seed.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Because or they might. Yeah, I don't know.
Right, Texans 7-5.
No, I'm talking about the Jags.
Oh yeah, because they lost. To
Yeah. So it's like they're pretty much, unless they completely fall apart, gonna make the playoffs.
Right.
So it's just like, all right, at this point, like it's kind of like the horrendous Derek or David Carr take about how Mariota should be playing over Hurts.
I just saw that like an hour ago, and I was like, what the heck?
What he was really saying is that if Hurts is hurt, don't play him because you're going to make the playoffs. But like then he went into this whole rant about using a lot of words, and it was like, all right, you're just digging a hole a bit.
But like, I don't think that he's hurt to the point where it's impacting his game. I just don't think that the Eagles have really played to their full potential, and taking them out isn't going to help them get there.
No, opinion. For sure. Yeah, it's definitely weird. It's like the biggest shock to me is like their offense is moving, but their defense has been horrendous, and all of the players that they have on that defense that I think would be balling out, like it'll be interesting, especially now they have Shaq Leonard too. Or what did he change his name to?
That is what he changed it to. It was Darius.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
The Diesel, Leonard. Anyways, back onto the injury front since I'm not even halfway through the list yet.
Sad.
Tyler Higbee. He was initially placed into the protocol, but he is not in the protocol. He actually got a stinger. Stingers are really weird. Like that could be like you're in the game and then 20 minutes later you're fine.
Right.
And just like you're good. Or like it could take weeks.
Yeah, it's like when is your nerve gonna come free? Like
right. So I mean I anticipate he'd probably play because it's a rare occasion where a stinger lasts pretty long, but something to monitor. Puka Nacua, AC joint sprain, which sounds brutal. If he was a quarterback, obviously we'd be, real worried about it. But they're saying that he's fine. He's going to play. He missed, like he went into the locker room and then came out and just started running all these jet sweeps. And it was just like so sick again. It was just like nothing happened. But
which is crazy. It's like I would imagine like if I had a player that just jacked their shoulder up, the last thing that I would want to do is put them in positions where they're immediately going to get hit on that shoulder. Right. But
yeah, so obviously he's fine. So
yeah,
there. But they have the Browns this week, right? Or is that was last week? Who did they have this week?
Let's see.
They have the Ravens. That was the tough matchup.
That's right. Yeah.
He has a tough matchup. So you'd probably expect a little less from Puka Nacua this week. Injury plus bad matchup, but he's obviously a guy, unless you have insane options at wide receiver, that you're probably going to end up playing anyways.
Sure.
Ramondre Stevenson, he has a high ankle sprain. We're going to get into that more later, right? So
we're going to hold off on that one.
He's definitely going to be out this week. He's probably going to miss multiple weeks.
I don't see why they would play him the rest of the year.
He's probably an IR candidate to be done because they're not playing for anything. So you're right. DeAndre Swift. This one, I don't know why he left this game. It was undisclosed, and I just verified that he wasn't on the report.
He got popped. He took a brutal took the air out of my lungs.
It must have just been so bad when he got the air knocked down. They were just like, "You're not going back in." Plus, they were getting smoked. So, undisclosed injury, but he's off the report, so he's fine. Just in case anybody was worried about that. Najee popped up on the report, which this was weird. He didn't even miss any time during the game, but he has a knee injury. I don't think he's going to play, especially because he wasn't a participant in practice again today, and we play tomorrow night on Thursday night. So it's it's tough to say because the Pats matchup is terrible. Like it is a really bad matchup for how bad they are as a team. Their defense,
Their defense has been balling. It's like the perfect tank. Like their
yeah,
defense keeps them in games, and then they're just like screw over their young QBs and like, nah, try to throw it to like Dusty, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Devontae Parker. Like,
yeah. But I mean, if Najee doesn't play, even with the bad matchup, I think that Jalen is someone that you should still play because I just
oh,
think
you have to on volume alone.
yeah, volume alone, you should be playing Jalen. So
Yeah, it's crazy. The Patriots in full PPR are giving up 10.9 points per game in the last 3 weeks, and that's against the Chargers with Eckler, who we'll talk about in a little bit, Giants with Zeke, and then Indianapolis with Jonathan Taylor, which was before the injury. So, yeah, their defense is insane. They're averaging as a team, and this is including the offense, like and giving up points to defenses, 68.4 points per game in fantasy if you only played players that were against the Patriots. Like that's insane.
yeah, yeah, and I mean the over under on this game is 30. So we're
If we get
already
to double digits, I'll be thrilled.
yeah. I'm sitting here actually thinking about taking the over just because 30 is just like such a ridiculously
It's
low number.
so low. It's so low. I have a feeling it's gonna be a shootout. Honestly,
I might take the over just because no one expects it. So like that's why it would happen. But
yeah.
I mean, I could definitely see Jalen falling into the end zone, and at the least, I wouldn't be shocked if he had 4 receptions in this game. So play Jalen if Najee's out. I think that if Najee plays, I would put him nowhere near my starting lineup.
Najee, you mean?
That's yeah, Najee. That's what I said.
Yeah.
Yeah, if Najee plays, don't start him. I wouldn't. But if Najee misses, I think Jalen's a must play.
Yeah.
And then Kenny, he suffered that high ankle sprain and had surgery. Um, we actually have a benchmark for this one. So Kenny suffered the same injury when he was at Pitt, just in the other ankle, and he only missed
Right.
2 weeks. So I don't think he's an IR candidate. I do think that he will be back in 2 or 3 weeks. But again, you weren't starting him anyways because he hasn't shown anything.
No.
And then Zach Charbonnet, he suffered a knee bruise. I don't know the severity of this, the potential that he misses.
They said him and Ken Walker today did some stuff in
Yeah.
practice. Whatever that means.
Yeah.
Interpret that what you will.
And all they said for Charbonnet is that his knee puffed up. He turned into a cheese puff. That's all they got. So I don't even know what the severity is. He could have just taken a nasty hit on it right in the bone, and then there was some fluid buildup. But who knows? Something to monitor throughout the week. Their matchup.
They're playing San Francisco, so I don't know.
Yeah, so
whoever the third player is, like
you're out on it anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even if Charbonnet plays and Walker doesn't, you still consider being out because he hasn't been overly effective in the 2 weeks that he started without Walker. I think last week he was solid, but the week before that he was very mid.
Which is surprising because I think he was one of those players that was like, it's unfortunate that he went to Seattle because of the situation. Right. He got the opportunity. I thought he was going to seize it a bit more, but hasn't panned out that way.
Yeah, it's really weird. The Charbonnet. He was like our Tyjae Spears, Roshan Johnson stash. If you get the opportunity, he can win you a league, and it just hasn't happened.
Yeah.
And then I only got 2 more finally. First one, Derrick Henry, very easy. He left the game, thought that he'd be in the concussion protocol, but he has no symptoms. He's already out of the protocol if he was ever in it.
Which is crazy because he was like knocked out cold.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird. I mean, you could take that with a grain of salt, though, considering we all know concussions are non-linear injuries. It could pop up again on Friday where he has a headache and he end up back on the protocol. So it's something to monitor. Yeah. But it sounds like he's good.
I guess there's nothing that can stop you from getting put to sleep, but then also not being concussed too. So I don't know. Not a doctor.
Neither am I.
Allegedly.
And then finally, Brian Robinson Jr. left the game with a hamstring injury. Commanders are on a bye, so they don't have to give us a report. So that's something to monitor throughout the next 2 weeks. If he does miss time, I think Antonio Gibson's going to be a great play. And if you're in deep leagues and you need someone to fill in, but you don't have much options, you could go with Chris Rodriguez because they are a committee backfield, but definitely something to be shaky about. Not something I feel confident in doing if you have.
I like Chris Rodriguez a lot, actually. I think that he could actually be the guy in that room. Like,
But
not more than Brian Robinson, but the way that they hate Antonio Gibson, I could see him. Like, it's kind of like last year, like, right? Like, why you liked Kyron Williams. Because Sean McVay loved Kyron Williams. All you do is talk about Kyron Williams. Pretty much it's the opposite with the Commanders. Like, they hate Gibson. Like, Gibson even thinks about fumbling the football, they bench him.
Yeah. I mean, I think Brian Robinson's going to play, to be honest. I mean, he got shot and played, so what's a hammy to him?
True.
Like, he's going to be on the field, but, like, who knows? It's just something to monitor throughout the next 2 weeks, especially going into playoffs. If you need something, Rodriguez is out there and Gibson's out there. But I think that Brian Robinson will probably fight through. But.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, hopefully no one else gets hurt because it's been a crazy year as far as injuries, especially like the QB position. Like it's getting messy out there. But
yeah, for sure.
We'll see what we can do. All right. So to transition, let's talk headlines a little bit. So one of the hot topics that we want to talk about, Austin Eckler. So Austin Eckler was a premium draft pick going into the season. I would argue probably within the top 5 picks. So if you think back to like early glory days when we all loved our teams and thought we were going to go undefeated, you got to imagine Justin Jefferson was one. I would say Christian McCaffrey and Chase were probably in the 2-3 back and forth in some capacity. Kelsey was probably
Eckler too.
Yeah, Kelsey was in that mix, and I would say Eckler was in the mix as well. Not that Kelsey hasn't performed, but I don't think he lived up to like top 5 pick hype this year.
Yeah, it's been brutal.
And Eckler, I would completely say looks like a bust, and I have severe concerns about him from like a dynasty perspective as well. Mm-hmm. So some stats to hit you with. So Austin Eckler averaged 1.3 yards per carry last week in their game. Not really too ideal there. This is his 3rd game this season where he's had at least 14 carries and was held under 30 rushing yards. He's only averaged above 3.6 yards per carry once in the last 8 games. He has a yards per attempt of 3, which is the 3rd lowest in the league. He has 3 fumbles. He has, and this is all within the last like 2 months. He has the 2nd worst PFF grade for running backs. And from a rushing perspective, he has the 6th lowest. His yards after contact is 2.35. He's had 4 drops, and his elusiveness rating is at 30.9, which is the 6th lowest for qualifying running backs during that time. So, Drew, I know that he's been banged up. He missed 3 weeks in the middle of the season. Do you think that the injury is slowing him down, or is Father Time starting to show through the cracks of a very formidable fantasy player for the last 5 years or so?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that this is an Eckler thing. I'm worried about him. I'll be honest with you. I am worried about him, but I think it's just the team, dude. Like, Brandon Staley needs to get out of there. Everything went to crap when Josh Palmer was placed on IR, who
did return or like is eligible to return starting today. Yeah.
Yes. So he was added back to the practice roster. His 21-day window was opened. That's a good sign. But ultimately, their matchups the rest of the way are not good. They're middle to bad the rest of the way. Denver, 19th against the run. Las Vegas, 17th. Buffalo, 18th. Denver, 19th. Kansas City again at 14th. Like, they're right in the middle there. He doesn't have great matchups. He hasn't been good. He's not getting a lot in the passing game either, which is where you always ate with Austin Eckler.
Oh, yeah. He would average like 14 alone just from like receiving work.
Yeah. And it's just not happening. It's just that whole offense, I feel like this has the yips. Like, Herbert's been bad. I think that you could argue not starting him, which is crazy considering.
Ooh, I don't know about that. I think Herbert leads the league in QB1 performances this year.
But like as of late, right?
Yeah.
He's been pretty brutal. That was actually like basically what I was about to say. Like, he started off as one of the best values at the quarterback position.
Yeah.
Completely tailed off in the last 3 weeks. And I just don't think that the offense is fighting around Brandon Staley. I think
he's going to get fired. I'm surprised that he hasn't already.
Yep. It should happen. I mean, Schefter already talked about he might see 10 plus coaches fired. There's just no way he's not one of them. There's just no way.
Yeah.
I just think that this is kind of a lost season for the Chargers, and it's coming down to the end. It's just wait out the clock and get to 2024 type of situation. I'm hoping when Josh Palmer comes back that maybe it'll spark some life because he was very, very good before he went down.
Yeah, he looked great.
Happening.
Yeah. It's crazy to me, like, as like a Steelers fan, to see like people are like, oh man, like I'm really disappointed with how the Steelers are at 7-5. It's like I couldn't imagine like having like Josh Allen on the Bills and being 6-6, or like the Chargers, who like don't even look like a competent franchise for the second franchise quarterback in a row that they've had. Like
and
they had
Herbert is elite.
he's legit.
Yes.
So it's like to not even do anything with him at all so far in this rookie deal. And that clock's ticking. There's only 2 years left before his contract goes up. So it's like they already extended him, but like there's going to be a lot of money that's thrown into him. And if you can't win with him on the cheap, then like how do you rectify that? And they got a lot of money tied up in Keenan Allen and Mike Williams next year. Quentin Johnson hasn't lived up to the draft capital that they put on him. So then it becomes a really scary thing of like, who are you going to surround him with? And he's been great, but is he to the level of Patrick Mahomes, who can make like a team out of nothing? I don't think he's Patrick Mahomes tier. And you could even argue, like, look at how it's impacting Mahomes that he has no one on his team and Kelsey slowed down.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he hasn't had a ton of success. Like, he hasn't really been startable in fantasy most of the season. Like, Brock Purdy has outplayed him almost every week. And I think that's a combination of like defenses don't allow the big play, and he has no formidable weapons on that team. The Chargers, I mean, he's been getting saved that for whatever reason, no one can figure out that the only person that he's going to throw to is Keenan Allen. And he's just been doing that all season. But it's chaos.
Yeah, I'm not buying the Chargers anymore. And if you've gotten to where you are and you have a shot at the playoffs with Austin Eckler and your deadline hasn't passed, you got to see if someone will take him based off name. You just have
to. I just don't even know what you could get for him. Like a second, maybe if you're like lucky and someone's not paying attention. Like to me, it's like he's someone that I would pay like a third for, like in the off season or in the draft, like because that like they're probably going to draft another running back because they've tried with Spiller a couple years ago and he hasn't really panned out. They still prefer Josh Kelly. But it's like I could see a scenario where the Chargers are drafting some new offensive players coming into next year.
Yeah, I think they got to look at receiver again. There's 3 really good receivers I like at the top that I think would fit the bill. Neighbors or a Dunze.
Neighbors is nasty.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
especially because Mike Williams coming off the ACL, he's older. Keenan Allen's older. I think you just got to go receiver again. You got to build around Herbert. I think that they can. I think that they'll probably extend Eckler. I do. They could go running back to your point, just because you could get that value late.
Yeah, I was gonna say you can't go like first round running back by any means, but I mean that team has a lot of holes. Like there's obviously a lot of problems with it.
They need to fix their defense. Like Jesus, too. Like for several years they haven't been able to do it there either.
No, yeah. But we'll see. Yeah, Chad said
I like Brock Bowers
with them too. Brock Bowers would be insane.
I just don't think that he'll be there when they pick. I think that he's going to go pretty early, top 5, in my opinion.
Belichick's going to take him at 2 and just shock the world.
Yeah. But, I mean, they should go quarterback. But I just don't think Bowers is going to be there.
Yeah. But, yeah, we'll see. It's scary times. And you know what? Father Time always wins. So, I mean, for his sake, I hope that it's just like trying to play through something that isn't so great. I think he wasn't on my draft list this year. I don't see in a redraft scenario next year that he sniffs it for me. But he is someone that I would take a chance on in the offseason in Dynasty, just to see even if he isn't as effective, if they're doing the dump off thing, then we'll see. Cool. All right. So transition a little bit on a little bit more of a fun news. So last 2-3 years of fantasy football, it's always been the talk of the death of tight ends and how you should remove tight ends from fantasy football, and how if you only have Travis Kelce, it's such an unfair advantage to everybody else that we should eliminate the position and just have more flexes. Well, my friends, I think we are entering the golden age of tight ends once again. We've seen a lot of new faces hit the scene, with Sam Laporta being the star of that show, currently third in fantasy points per game on the season, trailing only Travis Kelce and TJ Hawkinson by only a couple of points. But a lot of new faces to think about. Cole Kmet still busting on the scene. Jake Ferguson, Dalton Kincaid. Let's see, Trey McBride. From a fantasy points per game perspective, like all of these guys, top 15 options. We have, if we're looking at it, if you include Trey McBride and Taysom Hill, you have roughly 11 tight ends that are averaging 10 points per game in PPR or better. So all of a sudden, the position's looking real nice. And that doesn't even include guys that really kind of had down years like Kyle Pitts, Pat Freiermuth, young players that we expected to do more, and probably somebody that will be targeting very heavily in the offseason, Mike Meyer in Las Vegas. I really liked him coming out. Didn't really have a good first season. Kind of reminds me a lot of how Trey McBride was behind Zach Ertz, even though he had the opportunity really to take hold of that offense. But and you got guys like Brock Bowers is coming in. You got Cade Otton, who's done well in Tampa Bay. You might hear his name pop up a little bit later. But yeah, it seems like you got a lot of different stuff happening. So, Drew, what are you thinking about tight ends in fantasy football? And what do you got to say about these young guys? Even somebody like Evan Ingram, top 5.
Top 3, right? Now. Is he four or 5?
He's probably 4 or 5 in total points, but points per games, he is 6th.
Yeah. I don't. It's just great. Like, I spent so many years in Dynasty just like trying to get a tight end, and now there's just so many out there now. My big thing that I wanted to talk to you about, because you already touched on a lot of my main points, is for me, I think Sam Laporta is my top tight end next year in redraft. And I don't know if that's crazy, but like I'm telling you right now, I would go Sam Laporta over Mark Andrews. I would go Sam Laporta over Travis Kelce.
I think Travis Kelce retires at the end of the year personally, but that's just me.
I actually predicted that for last year, but now that he's with Swift, like I just feel like he needs to go and just enjoy his life. I think he comes back ultimately. He'll probably finish out his contract. But I just think Laporta has just been the better player, and the Lions are obviously an upcoming offense. Jameson Williams is spreading that field out for Amon-Ra and Laporta. And I don't know where Laporta is going to go in terms of his ADP next year, but I can't imagine that it's going to be before like round 3. And I think that that's an extreme value for Laporta. I think he's my tight end 1 going into redraft next year. And I wanted to hear what your thoughts were with that.
I don't think I'm ready to crown him that just yet. I think he's definitely in the conversation. I think if Kelce does stick around, he's going to be tight end 1 just by de facto of being Travis Kelce.
But his ADP, like
his ADP is going to fall relative to where it was this year. But it's fun.
Second round?
I think he goes. I think you still will have people that will draft him at the turn of the first and second.
Yeah.
What is funny is that for whatever reason, for like the last like 4 or 5 years, Travis Kelce's production goes like this, and he's on the down. So in theory, next year, by the transitive property of math, he'll bounce back. I think that depending on the QB situation for Minnesota, that will dictate what happens with Hawkinson. I think that Andrews still probably goes number 2 just because Hawkinson has Addison and Justin Jefferson as mouths to feed.
I think that same argument could be had for Zay Flowers. I think OBJ is really coming on now too.
Will OBJ be there next year?
I think that he will. Because Lamar brought him there. And knowing the Ravens, the way they pick, I think that there's going to be another rookie wide receiver coming in that might have some hype.
Yeah,
been that for several years now. I think that Andrews. Not going to worry about injuries because I don't really consider him injury prone. He's had some tough injuries the last 2 years.
Yeah.
But I went into this season and I told you I was down on Andrews because I just felt like they were going to try really hard to get the ball to the receivers more often. And now that's starting to happen and they're doing it successfully, that I think that that's still going to be a focus going into next year. And I think that he's going to cut back on his target some. I think that Laporta has just been so good that I just think that Jared Goff is going to keep throwing it to him. And I think that Jared Goff does better when he throws to the tight end position. I think that Jameis Williams is going to get even better, which I still think that he's more of like a big play guy.
Yeah.
I could see Laporta just next year just really popping off in his second season, being like a guy that you expect like 6 receptions from a week.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm talking more consensus rankings of what I think is going to happen. I probably will have him up there as well. Am I going to be willing to draft him in the third or fourth round? I don't know. But I think that Kelsey will be one. I think like some combination of Andrews and Hawkinson will be like the two, 3. I think Laporta is going to be right in that mix, but I think like he'll fall. So I'm going to say probably like mid third, early fourth. And I think that to me, like depending on how Trey McBride finishes the year, like he could very much end up in that conversation as well.
I think I would take McBride over Kelsey, all things staying the same right now next year too.
Yeah. Which is funny because 2 weeks ago I traded straight up McBride for Andrews after he got hurt.
Yeah, I remember we talked about that. You acquired McBride, right? And you got some picks.
No, I traded McBride for Andrews.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, straight up.
I still think that's a deal for you, but
yeah,
we don't really know what the Cardinals are going to look like next year. I think that they really need to try to go get Marvin Harrison Jr. in the draft, which obviously will hurt McBride, but right now he's the best option that they have.
For sure. Yeah, I mean it's either him or Greg Dortch right now. Like respect Greg Dortch, but I mean, come on.
Chad's saying that Goff might be a trade candidate in his final year.
I don't think so. I think that's their guy. I think he was. I think the only people that thought he was a bridge QB was outsiders. I think the Lions got everything that they wanted from him, and they would be foolish to move on.
Yeah, someone just posted an article online the last 2 weeks because he had 2 really bad games where he was turning the ball over, and they were saying that if he continues to do that, they might consider going in a different direction to try to get him over the hump. But it made it seem like it was more if they can get like an impact quarterback in the draft kind of thing, which I don't think that they're going to be able to do that based on their draft positioning.
No,
I don't think that there's anyone out there that is going to take them to the Super Bowl, at least right now.
And I think with this draft class being so deep at QB, why would you trade your first where you can make a pick on an impact quarterback to then get Jared Goff?
And he's saying the line gets weaker potentially, like they can't pay him in the O-line. I think that their O-line's really solid. I mean,
they're already paying him.
Yeah. But he's saying that they can't pay him in the entire O-line. Like I understand that, but like it's difficult to gauge how that'll go because they might not be able to pay the O-line anyways because every single team in the NFL is looking for O-line every single year, and it's just whoever has the ability to do that. And I don't think just getting rid of your quarterback is going to be good enough to do that. Unless you're
for sure.
It's just like you talk about this all the time, and it's one of my favorite stats that you have is that like most teams haven't won a Super Bowl with a guy that's not on a rookie deal. Like I think if they go anywhere, they're going to go in the draft and try to get someone to develop. I mean, this year would have been perfect if they were able to get one of Stroud or Richardson. I think those would have been their guys, but like they're not high enough to do that. So I don't know.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it shakes. Just to get a question answered here in the chat from Chad. Looks like a dynasty question. So need some dynasty help. Have a late first and a second handful of thirds. QBs are Hurts, Anthony Richardson, Tommy DeVito, Skylar Thompson, Bijan Ramonde, Jaleel McLaughlin, P. Ryan, Latavius Murray, Jettas, Devonta Smith, Trey Palmer, Hyatt, Irwin, Trey Tucker. Booty, Shorter, Pitts, Schoonmaker, Gray, Parkinson. With that list, what would you try to fix the depth issue? I mean, I don't really give a shit about depth in Dynasty. I think having a bunch of like players is like, it is what it is. I'd rather have a group full of studs and see who can stay healthy and figure it out. Obviously, like your running back situation is pretty tough. Your receiving situation beyond Devonta Smith is arguably worse. but Hurts and Anthony Richardson, I mean, you're pretty much set. I think if it's me going into that draft, if it's going to be a late first, you're probably not looking at any of like, I don't see Bowers being available. You're not getting probably any of the top 2 QB. So you're probably not looking at like a, I don't know, maybe you can swing like a Jaden Daniels depending on when he gets drafted. Maybe there's a receiver that falls a little bit in the draft. I always think that you just take best player available and don't worry about need because you can always trade for need later. But if you're wanting to shore up depth, if you still haven't had the trade deadline yet, Hyatt just popped off and had a big game. I'm not really sold on them long term as far as like what they're going to do with the Giants. I think that like Ramondre could be like somebody that you trade off to somebody that's looking to compete, perhaps, or depending on what you're going to get for Bijan. I think from a dynasty perspective, I always think that like running back's the last thing you need to figure out. So if you can get a good haul for Bijan and maybe get some more impact players there, that's kind of how I would approach it. But yeah, I would say the other thing you can do is just take shots on players that you think might have a role next year. I don't think like someone like Trey Irwin or like Trey Tucker, like Keyshawn Boutte, like they're never going to be impact players. So it's to me like you have them on the bench. They're not going to do anything. Like get some real lottery tickets like what's his face from the Jaguars that popped off randomly yesterday.
Parker Washington.
Yeah, Parker Washington. Like guys like that are rookies or young or in a murky situation for next year that could have some role.
Another guy, I just want to expand a little bit on his point because I agree with Joe with a lot of things. I don't really worry about depth either, mainly because I think that as the season goes on, your depth comes from guys that get an opportunity because of injury. So you just kind of have your studs and then you just try to work the waiver wire to hold some fab and get guys that you can just fill in terms of depth options. But a guy that I'm looking at personally is Chase Brown, the backup running back to Joe Mixon, mainly because the last couple of weeks, his snap counts still haven't really been that high, but when he's been on the field, they've been actively giving him the ball. So I think last week he only had 11 snaps, but he touched the ball 9 times in those 11, something crazy like that. And I thought that they'd move on from Joe Mixon last year and they were going to look at grabbing someone in the draft and then they went with Chase Brown. I think that if Mixon gets hurt, Chase Brown could be a potential league winner because they clearly trust to give him the ball when he's on the field.
Yeah. I like it.
He said he tried to go after Brown. So yeah, we're kind of on the same page there.
Yeah.
Washington I like, but with Beathard probably being the guy, he's not going to support enough, but maybe down the line if Lawrence comes back. But
somebody that I would also look at is like somebody like Deontay Johnson next year. He's probably going to be even lower valued, especially if he stays with the Steelers, assuming that Kenny Pickett's still going to be the quarterback. Like I feel like you could get him super cheap next year. So it's like maybe there's players that are like, all right, like where can you find like players that you're looking to rebound with? And if he goes to a new team, I think he's going to ball out because of his route running ability.
I also like Trey Palmer.
You know what? That's probably who T. Palm is in his list.
Yeah, I was looking at that. I wanted to say I really like him. I think that he's going to be a guy next year. I really liked his talent in the preseason, and I think that Mike Evans is moving on. Obviously, he had the issues with his contract. The Buccaneers are not going to be a competitive team for him to win another Super Bowl with. I think he's out, and I think that Trey Palmer and Chris Godwin could be the top 2 guys in Tampa next year.
Nice.
So I would hold that.
Sweet. Well, it's been fun, but I haven't got to Tinder in like a long time. It would have been fun to do some international Tindering, but y'all know what it is. It's fantasy football Tinder, fan favorite of the show for all of the dozens that watch it. But every week we have 2 different topics that we talk about that are controversial within the fantasy football space. And we're either going to swipe right on it, which means that we're agreeing, we're into it, we're supportive, we are trying to smash, or we're going to swipe left, which means we're not interested, we don't want it, let's find something else. So, prime example of this, our boy, manager of the whole shebang around the 412. So, was Zach's legendary status cemented this past season, or this past weekend, at the most recent Steelers home game, which Drew was also in attendance for. Ball knowers, people that know all the insides and outs of things, they all know that this is very much true. Legend, always has been, always will be. For all of the haters, they're going to swipe right, or although they're going to swipe left, and you'll see that with the red X's on the screen, which I did not upload into our template. Gotta love the rust. But Drew, let's get things started. I feel like there's actually a bunch of stuff missing now that I'm here.
I don't even remember which way I swiped, so it's not like you're missing anything.
Let's see. So there we go. So we're going to get started. It's a hot topic. Once again, Green Bay, they have found potentially another franchise guy, right? So Jordan Love, he's got a big game last week against Kansas City, upstages Patrick Mahomes at home in front of Travis Kelce and Travis Kelce's girlfriend, Taylor Swift. So, Drew, is love your drug? Are you into it? Had to hit the Kesha reference. I love Kesha. She's good.
Yeah, I didn't think that was coming. I'm pretty sure that I swiped right with this based on my notes.
You did swipe right.
Yeah, I'm really vibing with Jordan Love lately. So last 4 weeks, QB 12, QB 7, QB 5, QB 4. He's on the upswing, which is, what Mike Tomlin says you want to be this time of year, making hell in December. Mainly last week, though, he had an awful matchup last week against Kansas City. They've been dominating on defense. Yeah. Ladarius Sneed's been difficult to, work with the receivers with when he's shadowing, and Christian Watson popped off as well. And I think that he has arguably the best playoff schedule among quarterbacks the rest of the way. So he has the Giants this week, Buccaneers, Panthers. The Vikings are a tougher matchup, but considering they're familiar with each other, I think that he could get by. I'm not more afraid of the Vikings than I would be the Chiefs. Then he ends with the Bears, who have just been absolutely terrible against QBs. I think that, last 3 weeks, the Bears have looked good. Just in case the charts go out there. But a long haul through the season, I think that
their defense has been strong. Yeah, they're only giving up 8.5 points per game in the last 3 weeks.
I think that's mostly because they completely destroyed Josh Dobbs.
And they also played Carolina in that 3 weeks, man, as well.
Yeah, so over the course of the season, I think that they've been a better matchup. I just think that Jordan Love is just on fire, too. And you can't really ignore when someone's just stepping on the field with that much confidence. I think that he's a guy that you could even argue, because Pat Mahomes has not been good, based on some of the weeks and some of his matchups, you could start him over Pat Mahomes. You don't have the guts to do that. I don't have the guts to do that in playoff format, but Jordan Love's been that good, and he just deserves the respect.
Yeah, Jordan Love, 13 career starts. He has 4 games of 3+ passing TDs and 0 interceptions. There's 5 QBs that have done that are not Jordan Love. Pat Mahomes, Big Dick, Nick Folk, Kurt Warner, and then Wade Wilson, Jordan Love. So pretty elite company there. That being said, excited for him. I think he's going to be a really good value play. Could be like a low-end QB1, but I'm actually, from a fantasy football for 2023, I'm going to swipe left on this one. The reason why isn't really a reflection of Jordan Love, but the way that they're running the offense for him. I think that it's really going to be interesting to see what they do. So they're really focused on sustaining long drives, and the personnel groups that they're using in those situations support that. So the number of drives that they're getting and the pace of play that they have is pretty low. And they had at least 2 first downs on every drive last week against Kansas City. So that just doesn't leave a lot of time. They're basically killing the clock. They also don't have Aaron Jones right now. So I think they're more willing to rely on Jordan Love right now. But I have to imagine that as Aaron Jones gets back into the lineup, that he'll probably take priority on the kind of the red zone play. They're using more run formations, which is bad news for Jaden Reed. But they're doing a lot of 11 personnel, so that just means that he's not getting a lot of skinny. So I think for me, back end QB1, he does have that potential. I really like the matchup this week, but the tough matchups moving forward, they do scare me. We've seen flashes with Love this season. I don't think he's quite there of putting it together week to week. But I am excited for him, especially moving forward in future seasons. So it's kind of where we're sitting there. Okay, one thing before we move into our second Tinder, Chad hit us with a game break here. So according to Schefter, he's saying that Hayden Hurst's dad tweeted that his son has been diagnosed with post-traumatic amnesia by an independent neurologist from the hit in Chicago on November 9th. Absolutely insanity. That's terrible. I honestly don't know what that means.
Essentially what's happening with him, which I'm correct, the chat can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that he's essentially living with a constant state of confusion. So he took a hit that was so severe that he doesn't even know who he is.
Dang.
He wouldn't be able to, if you were to talk to him day to day, he would probably just say gibberish in a way. Hopefully he bounces back. I actually was trying to find the tweet when I saw him post that. I didn't find it, but I'm sure it's right on the top of my feed somewhere. But that's terrible. So I know we were talking last night. You had considered taking Hurst as your Tinder, or
OnlyFantasy. Yeah, that's definitely not going to be a thing. He probably is not playing football again if that's the state of where he's at.
Especially this season. But it was just crazy because I told you that he was out with a concussion, but I didn't actually realize that this hit happened on November 9th.
Yeah.
So that's very significant, and hopefully he pulls through.
Especially because it's been almost a month now.
That's what I mean. I didn't realize it was that long ago that he's been in the protocol.
Yeah.
You've been out off the show with your vacation and stuff. I didn't realize it. So hopefully he pulls through. He bounces back, but that's scary.
Yeah, definitely scary stuff. But yeah. Okay, so moving on to Tinder 2. So as discussed earlier in the show, Ramondre Stevenson, high ankle sprain, not expecting him this week or future weeks. So in comes the Salvation Army king of the cup, Zeke Elliott, signed in the offseason by the Patriots. Drew, are we in good again with Zeke, or what do you think is going to happen with this super high-powered Patriots offense now that Zeke the Freak back in the lineup?
I'm actually going to answer that question with Chad's question that he added there.
Okay.
About Ramondre.
Yeah.
I'm going to swipe left on Zeke. It's not a Zeke thing, though, and it's not a Ramondre thing, only because I think that there's probably better options out there. The Steelers, they've been kind of porous to running backs as of late, especially with the option that Elandon Roberts might be out this week. James Conner gashed them pretty well last week. But beyond that, I don't really like their matchups. Chiefs, Broncos, Bills, Jets. You might be able to run on the Bills. But for the Ramondre part, I did want to point out with my Zeke points is that Ramondre is actually, even though they haven't been scoring points, he's still been a solid fantasy football running back. 27.9, 13.2, and 21.7 the past 3 weeks. So Ramondre clearly doesn't need an impactful quarterback to be able to pay off for you in fantasy. So I don't think that you need to worry about that to answer his question. I just think that for Zeke, this week he might be a viable option if you need it, but I just think there's going to be better things out there for you than Zeke, because I would say he's probably running back 3 for me, maybe low end RB2. And I just think that there's so much depth at the wide receiver position that you wouldn't even consider flexing him. And I think you have better options at running back.
Yeah. Okay. So I think the key for this week ultimately becomes what happens, like you said, with Elandon Roberts. If you look at the stats from last week's game with the Steelers, Elandon Roberts, when he was in the game, averaging 2 yards per carry, gave up over 5 yards per carry once he left the game. So to me, it's like if Elandon Roberts isn't playing, I'm definitely playing Zeke this week. The other thing, and the reason why I'm swiping right on this one, actually, just to be controversial, is they don't really have a lot of other running back depth. Ty Montgomery is there, and he's like kind of a running back ish. He's like the dollar store version of like Cordell Patterson. And then they also have Jermichael Hasty, and they just got him from Jacksonville like a few weeks ago. Stevenson as well as Zeke have been getting a lot of like receptions because their wide receiver room is also decimated. And really last week after Stevenson went down, Hasty like came in for like a couple like breathers basically. So to me, it's just like, despite how bad that offense is, I wouldn't bank on him scoring, but it's almost like in the early season with Rachaad White, like how he was just kind of getting peppered with targets. He's going to have involvement. I think Zeke lacks the explosive kind of home run hitting that Stevenson has, but I think he's going to give you a good floor. So I do like Zeke, even though he may have the tougher matchups, especially because we know that Zeke can still run block too. I think that, or pass block, excuse me. I think that's really important. So
is James Robinson there?
James Robinson is there. They had just picked him up, and they also have Kevin Harris on the practice squad. But we'll see where it shakes.
Yeah, like I said, I agree with you for this week. I think he's a viable option if you need to. I'm trying to look elsewhere. I don't know if I trust him in the playoffs.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. I think it just depends on what you got left in some cases. Like I wouldn't feel great about it, but there are worse options to be had than Zeke in that situation. So we'll see. Here's one for you. Would you play Eckler or Zeke?
Yeah,
I think I'd play Zeke, as crazy as it sounds.
Yeah, I just don't know if I have the stones to sit Eckler in the playoffs. If you put that kind of draft capital on him and he goes off for 30.
Yeah, who would ever do that, Drew? Who would
that's
ever
exactly
bench?
what I mean. Like, when he says that he would play Zeke over Eckler, he's not lying because
I would do it.
Thinks the playoffs. I would just stick with Eckler and just hope that he regains his form. I wouldn't play Zeke over him.
Valid. All right, man. So we don't really have a lot to compare it to for last week, and we get yelled at when we play the sexy sacks. So we're going to dive right into OnlyFantasy. So every week we pick one player who we think is going to pop off, have a big week relative to expectations for that player for the week. Sometimes there is a science behind it. Sometimes there is a gut feeling behind it. Sometimes it's just we ball. So, Drew, I don't know if you've been secretly picking at home. I haven't had any really OnlyFantasy considerations in the last couple of weeks, so I don't have any emojis for you to describe how it's been going. But it is nice to have a couple of weeks where I haven't screwed it up. So let's see if we can finish out the year strong. Who's your guy?
Yeah, so I'm going to continue on with what I was talking about with Jordan Love. I'm going to go back to the well with his team and the Green Bay Packers, who are on an uptick in their play. I anticipate that Christian Watson, that even if he were to play, I think the hamstring is going to limit him. From weeks 10 to 12, this player was averaging almost 7 targets a game, over 50 yards in 2 out of 3, scored touchdowns in 2 out of 3, has been involved in the end-around game. He actually scored 3 touchdowns in 3 weeks. Just one was a rushing. Averaging close to 18 points a game in that stretch when Christian Watson was out. And that was before Jordan Love really started to pop off. That's Jayden Reed. I'm going with Jayden Reed this week. I've been pretty poor this year with OnlyFantasy, but I feel really good about this time. Especially if Christian Watson misses. I think that Jayden Reed's going to be a guy that really pays off for you if he's in your lineup.
Yeah. Really good matchup too. New York Giants giving up 52.1 points per game in the last 3 weeks to
they're
wide receivers.
To the Eagles, yep.
Solid. Sick. I like it. All right. So most of my success this season in OnlyFantasy has come from the lens of the wide receiver room. I did not go down the path of wide receivers today. But for me this week, this player has had 4+ receptions in 5 of the last 7 games. Last week didn't go so hot, despite the matchup. Put up a goose egg. Didn't even really get targeted, but I'm expecting a bounce back here. Currently leading all tight ends in the last 2 months in route participation. Mentioned this name briefly before, but my only fantasy for this week is going to be Cade Otton. I really like the matchup that we have here for Tampa Bay. So if we're looking at those matchups, let's see what we got here. So they're going against Atlanta. Atlanta has some really good shutdown corners. It's going to be a divisional game. In Atlanta, they're most porous against the tight end. So giving up 17.2 points per game in the last 3 weeks. And they haven't really been world beaters either. So it's going to be Arizona with McBride, which props. New Orleans with Taysom Hill. He had a pretty solid game. And then even with the Jets last week, who don't really even have that serviceable of a tight end. So I do think that there's an opportunity for him to shine. I think Mike Evans and Godwin are going to be bottled up a little bit more just because of A.J. Terrell and company holding it down, which is going to lead some opportunities for Cade Otton. So looking forward to see how that one pans out. And Chad is of the belief that Tucker Kraft could be the guy this week, which I could see. He looks pretty solid.
The Giants have only been giving up 5.5 points per game to tight ends over the past 3 weeks, and they face Logan Thomas, where Commanders are really, they're throwing the ball a ton. They also face the Cowboys and Jake Ferguson, who's been very good too. So, the matchup doesn't look good for tight ends, but I think Watson misses. So I think that even if he doesn't play, I think that there's plenty out there for both guys.
For sure. Sweet. All right. So that's going to wrap things up for us this week. So if you're not following us on social media, pretty foolish at this point. We talk about it every week. But you can find us on X at AT412FF Show. You can find us on YouTube or on Twitch at Around the 412. You can also find us on Linktree at Around the 412. Personals are in the chat and on our little things there. So at JOEFRK, at Drew Hannis. As always, one last thing to point out, something that our team does here around the 412 is rocking around the 412. We have already sponsored 25 different kids this year from a Salvation Army in Pittsburgh for their giving tree or whatever those are called. So we're really proud about that. If you follow us on any social media, we've been spamming out stuff about how you can get involved, how you can donate prizes, how you can donate money to continue to help support kids and their families in this holiday time. So if you find anything useful from us, whether it be the charts that we post online on Twitter or on Reddit, or questions that you've asked from the show or anything else, please consider giving us a little help in making Christmas and the holiday season good for as many people as we can. But if nothing else, I'm Joe Frick. That's Drew Hannis. We will be here next week to get y'all ready for the first round of the fantasy playoffs. If y'all have been listening on all year, maybe it'll be a low turnout because y'all probably be on bye week. But we'll come prepared and get y'all ready to get that bread. So with that, we'll end the show and hope y'all have a fantastic rest of your week. Go Steelers.
Good luck to everybody fishbowling.
Let's get it.